Hello everyone, hope everybody's doing great today. I appreciate those of you watching this video. I hope you enjoy it. Also appreciate those of you who have subscribed. Thank you very much. And today we'll be talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. There we go. Starring George Lazenby. I don't know. I can't pronounce his name. But an interesting footnote here for good old Georgie boy is that he's the only actor who played Bond to get a Golden Gold nomination for Best Actor. Good job, George. All right, so let's get into this. Before we get into this, I'm sorry. So this is movie number 6. I'm going to give my top 5 movies, James Bond's movies, up to this point, all right? This doesn't count this movie. This is the previous 5 movies, okay? Let me look at my notes here. Number 5, I got You Only Live Twice. And it was an okay movie. Number 4, I got Thunderball at number 4. I thought the underwater scenes were interesting. Number 3, Dr. No. 2, Goldfinger. And number 1, From Russia with Love. I really love that movie. So for the first 5, that's my favorite Bond movie, From Russia with Love. So let's get into On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And let's say this movie really gives you a good old-fashioned gut punch at the end, does it not? I think, now I haven't seen the very last Bond, so I do know the very last Bond that James Bond dies. But as far as I know, this is like the only James Bond movie that ends on a down note. I believe so. Usually, he ends with a woman in his arms, and it ends with them kissing, and the next step they're going to be doing the wild thing, right? So this one, though, really gives you a good old punch in the gut. So we'll get to that a little bit later on this video. So first off the bat, we get an inside joke here where George Lazenby or whatever says, good old George. I'm just going to call him good old George. Good old George says, that never happens to the other guy, because obviously this is the first movie without Sean Connery. So, it's a good inside joke. Ha, ha, ha. But on a more, canon note, I guess, if they really wanted to, they could use that line as a pretext to like James Bond as a code name, So if they wanted to, they could kind of make that as a sequence where James Bond's actually a code name. Which if they want to start changing actors like to different nationalities and skin tones and stuff like that, it would make sense as long as it's still a man. Because it'd be kind of weird if a girl's out there calling herself James Bond. But, this could open the door for black actors playing the role. If they wanted to, they could use that for that. But, I found it, I got a little chuckle of that, this never happened to the other guy. And what he means is, he gets this woman, she slaps him, and then she kind of leaves him deserted on the beach. So that's kind of where that line comes from. Never happened to Sean Connery, right? He got all the women in those first 5 movies. So I'm going to be occasionally looking at my notes. I got a lot of notes here. I don't write scripts, as you probably can tell here. But I really did enjoy this movie. I thought George Lazenby, by good old George here, did an excellent job playing Bond. He actually signed like a seven movie deal there, but he only did this one. He backed out. He kept bagging advice from his agent. Agent told him that he thinks James Bond's going to start going downhill. So he kind of opted out of that. I would be going down with the ship myself. That's 7 jobs guaranteed. I don't know what he was thinking. But I feel like he would have got better being Bond. Even Sean Connery and Dr. No, he was kind of up and down with that role. And this movie, good old George, he's the same way. I feel like as the movie progressed, he got a little bit better with it. I don't know if they shot this movie in sequence or not, but I feel like the last act, he was a lot better than he was at the first act. I feel like if he did continue this role, I feel like he would have been able to settle down to what he thought James Bond should be like and get into the motions. However, I would say I think he did a better job playing James Bond than Sean Connery did his first time around. Really did enjoy him as James Bond. It's definitely not the worst James Bond. I mean, how could he be the worst James Bond? He got a nomination for Best Actor, right? But I'm just saying, I do enjoy him better in some of the other Bonds. Definitely not the best, but it's definitely not the worst. The worst one doesn't come until like the 80s in my humble opinion. And that one was supposed to replace Sean Connery, but he felt it was too young. We'll get to that later on in the series when we get to the 80s. I really did enjoy the chasing scenes. I feel like this movie has the best Bond chasing scenes of the 60s, of this time period. They used like the close-up shots were done a little better than behind. If you've watched my previous Bond reviews, I've always complained like you got good chase scenes, but you just can tell that they're not, when they do the up close scenes, you know, whatever shots, the close scenes, that they're not actually in the car, they're not actually running away, driving away from the villains or chasing people. In this movie, they kind of cut it down in the car scenes they did, but once you get to like the ski chase scene, and especially when they're showing good old Blofeld or Terry's, however you say his name. Man, I'm terrible with names. Are you guys terrible with names? Terry Sanalis, whatever, however you say his last name. I can't pronounce names worth crap. But anyways, when they show him, you know, the close-ups with him, you can really tell he's not really skiing, you know. It's so fake that he's in front of a big screen or something. By the way, I love that guy in Kojak. Kojak was love watching the reruns. Anyways, back to the movie. The skiing scenes, you know, they were great until they did a close-up. Same with the bobsled chase scene. Fantastically done until they do the close-ups, and it kind of ruins it. Like, oh, you know, you're just so obvious. You know, it kind of takes you out of that universe. You know, you're really into it, and you're like, oh man, he's so obvious. He's not even in there. You know, he's in some studio with the screen behind him. But I feel like for the most part, the chase scenes were better, and especially in the car scenes, that it's not so, in the car scenes, not so obvious that they're in a studio, that there's a screen behind them, just on the skiing stuff. And I did enjoy the skiing scene, like when, you know, he's basically skiing down the hill with one foot, and then he kind of falls, and he takes the other ski, and he's just batting these villains out, these henchmen out of the sky with his skis, just going boom. He's hitting them, and they're falling everywhere. I don't know. I got a good chuckle. I thought that was pretty cool. I did enjoy the chase scenes a lot better. I do believe in this decade, Diana Rigg is probably the best female lead. Her character was really great. She's very competent. And I feel like her chemistry with good old George was excellent. You know, did do some research here. There was rumors that they didn't get along on set. But if they didn't get, you know, that's kind of may have been exaggerated. You know, good old media. I also think the media played a role in George. Good old George not returning for more James Bonds. They were kind of hard on him, saying, you know, comparing him to Sean Connery, you know, trying to dog him, trying to help this movie fail so Sean Connery would come back. Basically because Sean Connery wanted a certain amount of money. Studio wouldn't pay him, so they went to George. So, you know, the media spreading lies. You know what the media does. It's 2025. So I also think the media kind of played the role of not getting George back. But enough about George. Diana Rigg did an excellent job. I think she's the best female lead, the best Bond girl in the 60s. And maybe moving forward, she really does get in this role. She really gets this character right. I will say, though, she gets slapped a lot in this movie. She gets slapped by good old George. Good old Bond slaps her around. Her dad punches her out. I don't know. It's like you shouldn't laugh because she just got punched out, hit, you know, with a closed fist. But, you know, it was funny. I gave it a little chuckle there. I have no idea what's going on with my TV in the back. I don't know if I got this on fast forward or what's going on. Let's see here. Because that is not how the movie. It was all choppy back there. Anyways, do everything live. One take is my name. That's why these videos are so bad. So let's get here. Also, this is kind of oddly cut and dubbed at times. Like the voices don't really match, and some of the cut scenes and it's edited weird parts, especially at the beginning of this movie. But as you go on through the movie, everything gets settled, gets settled, flows a little bit better. The dubbing gets better. The voices acting gets a lot better. So it's just something you just gotta bear with at the beginning. But as the movie goes on, this movie just gets better. It just keeps, as the longer this movie goes, the better it gets. And then of course, at the end, you know, before I get to the ending, I have to say, talk about the skiing scene again. This has to have one of the grossest Bond deaths ever. So you get a little Fargo scene here where a guy gets kind of cut up, gets inside of a machine that kind of dices the snow, breaks up the snow, and he gets all chopped up in little pieces, and then like his blood and guts are flying through the air. I think this has to be the grossest death in a Bond movie. From what I can remember, I still got a lot of movies to go through, but from my memory here, I don't remember anybody getting that kind of death. And then at the end, of course, you get the good old gut punch where, you know, you got James Bond at the height of his life, you know, the happiest moment of his life. Everything's going great. He's talking about his future, you know. He never talks about his future, not in this movie. I mean, not in previous movies and no movies afterwards where he's talking about having a life with another woman, their dreams, what they're going to be doing. And then he gets all that, and he should have known, you know, this they're setting up for a death scene. And then it's kind of like Rambo 2, you know, the girl says, I love you, Rambo, and then 2 seconds, next scene, dead. And then that's what we get here. We get the good old drive-by from how you say his name, Blowfield River, and his hitchwoman there. They shoot him, shoot up the car, and she gets hit. And then, you know, I really feel for Bond, you know, saying, you know, she's all right. She's just resting for a little bit. You know, we still got forever together. You know, it's just him kind of coping with that death, with the love of his life dying in his arms. You know, he's just, you know, that's just how he's coping with it. You know, he's not going to cry and break down. He's just going to kind of shrug it off, suck it up, and be a man about it, you know. That's what men do. We don't really cry about stuff like that. You know, it hurts. And you can tell, I think good old Georgie here, does a great job of showing that hurt, you know, the emotion without tears. He does a great job playing that part. Excellent job showing that death scene. And then I'm kind of sad that, you know, after the Roger Moore movies, they don't really touch upon him being married. You know, you don't... I've seen most of the Daniel Craig movies, like the last 2 or 3 movies I haven't seen him in. Like once they get past Moore, like nobody goes back to her graveyard, to her tombstone grave, you know, and, you know, see his wife, you know. Kind of missed that part about the Bond, like that human feeling, you know, that this movie really gave him, you know, we get to really see a different side of Bond. All the other Bonds is just pure machismo, right? Either shoot up people, scoring girls in the bedroom, you know, everything's very superficial. All his relationships are superficial with his co-stars. And he's just, you know, shooting and getting laid all the time with no feelings about it. You know, he's completely cut off. This one, they dig a little bit more into him. Gave them more depth. The other ones, I feel like the Bond movies, the Bond characters, pretty shallow. With the Roger Moore movies, they give him a little bit more depth. You know, when he goes to see his wife, you know, give a little bit more meaning, but mostly it's just, you know, you only get to see the skin of Bond. You don't get to see the heart of Bond in the other movies, which you get to see a lot of that in this one. And then hopefully here, I can't remember much about the next one coming out. I'm hoping it's about revenge. I've seen it like one time, and it's been a long time ago. All these early 60 Bonds movies, I've only seen once or twice, and have been like, oh, so long ago where I don't really remember them until I start watching them, and then scenes are coming together. Like this last time with On Her Majesty's Service is only my second time ever watching it. And just a little heads up, it is one of my favorite Bond movies. It's a fantastic movie. I would, if somebody's never seen James Bond, and I would pop this one in and say, here, get a look at James Bond. I think they would fall in love with it. Have a great day, and hopefully you'll see me around. And if you're here at 14 minutes and 30 seconds, thank you for your patience. Adios.